It hit me like a physical blow, even though I was just standing in my own kitchen. October 26, 2023. The Ashwood Residence on Magnolia Lane. The phone felt slick in my hand. My daughter, Charlotte Miller, her voice unnervingly calm on the other end of the line.
Mom, I'm calling about the wedding.
My heart swelled, expecting details about seating or flowers, maybe asking for advice.
You're not invited.
The world tilted. Not invited to Charlotte's wedding? The words hung in the air, heavy, impossible. This couldn't be real. My mind scrambled, searching for a reason, a misunderstanding. Was it a joke? A cruel, misguided prank? If you've ever felt like the people you loved the most hurt you the deepest, stay with me. This story might be yours too. And if this touches your heart, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. The denial was a thick fog, but the sharpness of her tone cut right through it. I stood frozen. The familiar scent of pine needles and damp earth drifting through the open window. A cruel contrast to the desolation blooming inside me. It wasn't confusion I heard in her voice, or regret. It was a calculated flatness. My own daughter. This wasn't an oversight. The untold truth slammed into me. This was deliberate. A strategic move linked to Thomas Hayes and probably the Vance Family Foundation. Some perceived social leg up. Some financial angle I hadn't yet grasped. They underestimated me, grossly. They thought I would crumble, weep, perhaps plead. For a fleeting second, the heartbreak of the excluded mother was overwhelming, a raw wound. Then something inside me snapped. The pain didn't vanish, but I suddenly viewed it from a distance. The heartbroken mother dissolved, replaced by a numb observer, watching the scene unfold with chilling clarity. The crushing vulnerability solidified into something cold and sharp. My pain was not a weakness they could exploit. It was a source of power they hadn't anticipated. The call had changed everything, yes, but not in the way they intended. The silence in the Ashwood Residence on Magnolia Lane wasn't empty. It was heavy, weighted with the echo of Charlotte Miller's voice. Her words, "You're not invited," resonated in the air like shattered glass. It wasn't just a denial of entry. It was a physical blow, landing squarely in my chest. I stood in the quiet hall, the familiar scent of pine needles drifting in from an open window after a recent southern rain, feeling utterly alien in the home I'd built. I saw it then, laid bare in the stillness. Not a spontaneous outburst, but the cold, hard edge of planning. I remembered other moments, other carefully crafted barbs. Other times, Charlotte Miller had maneuvered situations, always for her own gain. And Arthur Davies, my husband, standing by, his silence a tacit agreement, his avoidance of conflict a breeding ground for her cruelty. He always chose the path of least resistance, and that path invariably led over me. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about control. It was about severing the ties, cleanly, unapologetically, but the true, untold truth behind the sting. It wasn't just the cruelty itself, as sharp as breaking glass. It was the sheer, arrogant certainty they had. They looked at me, at Eleanor Vance and saw someone who would simply absorb the impact, nod meekly, and endure. They were sure of my compliance, certain I would fold inward and disappear.
We talked about it? Easier this way.
I heard Charlotte Miller's voice again. Not an echo, but a memory I was pulling forward now, colder, more calculated than I'd allowed myself to see before. Easier for who? Easier than confronting the messy reality of my existence, my standing, my undeniable claim to a life she seemed determined to erase. Easier than acknowledging anything that didn't fit neatly into her narrative. My own voice, a whisper in the large, quiet space, felt foreign. It was a strategy. Plain and simple. A calculated move on a chessboard I hadn't realized I was still playing. The silence, the solitude, it all pressed in, threatening to suffocate. For a moment, the familiar ache of betrayal was overwhelming, threatening to drag me under the weight of it all. But then, something shifted. Deep beneath the pain, beneath the shock and the sorrow, a tiny spark ignited. It was indignation, small and fierce. They thought I would just take this? They were certain I would simply fade? A sharp, sudden clarity cut through the fog of hurt. The pain was real, yes, but the expectation of my passive acceptance was an insult I could not, would not tolerate. That spark, almost imperceptible, began to glow. It was the beginning of the end of standing still. The date was October 28th, 2023. The Ashwood Residence, usually a place of comfortable routine, felt suddenly cold, the air thick with the ghosts of unspoken expectations. My fingers traced the worn pattern on a porcelain cup as I placed it gently into a box.
You won't be needing this. Not where you're going.
Charlotte's voice, sharp and dismissive from 2 days ago, echoed in the quiet. It wasn't just about the wedding invitation. It was the implicit sentence passed, the casual assumption of my irrelevance, my hopelessness. This wasn't a defeat. This was the first move, a strategic withdrawal from a battlefield I hadn't chosen, but one I was now determined to win. Every item I packed was a deliberate step away from the manipulations that had tightened around me like a vine. The heavy silver serving spoons that had graced countless holiday tables into a box. The quilt Arthur Davies's grandmother had made, folded away. Not with sadness, but with a quiet, burning fury. They thought I had nowhere to go. No means to leave independently, certainly not on my terms. That was their gravest error. That was the untold truth they clung to, blinded by their own self-serving narrative. I needed transport. Not asking for a ride, not waiting for permission or assistance. Independent action. My phone felt heavy in my hand. I dialed the number.
Capital City Cabs. This is Brenda. How can I help you?
My voice was steady, clipped.
Address?
Ashwood Residence, Magnolia Lane.
Yes, we can have someone there in about 20 minutes. Name for the reservation?
Silence on the line stretched for a fraction too long. Just a fraction. Did she recognize the address? Did it matter? No. All right, Miss Vance, 20 minutes. I hung up. 20 minutes. 20 minutes until the vehicle arrived that would carry me away from the scent of pine needles and damp earth after a southern rain that always lingered here. Away from the life they had tried to dismantle piece by piece. Each packed box was a refusal to be confined by their assumptions. Each item carefully wrapped wasn't just an object. It was a boundary drawn, a reclaiming of self. This leaving wasn't an end. It was the explosive, necessary beginning. My first strategic countermove, executed not with fanfare, but with the quiet, cold resolve of someone underestimated for the very last time. The clock was ticking. The smell of ground coffee and worn leather hit me the moment I stepped into the Daily Bean, a comforting contrast to the sterile quiet I'd endured the last 2 days. Seeing Dolores Ramirez sitting at our usual corner table felt like finding solid ground after being tossed overboard. Her face, a canvas of familiar kindness, broke the tight knot in my chest. I slid into the opposite seat, not bothering with pleasantries, the words spilling out in a torrent I couldn't stop even if I tried. I told her everything. The invitation deception on October 26, 2023. Charlotte Miller's cold, calculated delivery, Arthur Davies' silence, the gut punch, the sudden clarity, the packing of bags, the capital city cab's taxi waiting outside Ashwood Residence on October 28, 2023. My voice trembled at first, raw with the remnants of shock and hurt. But as I spoke, a different current ran underneath. Something hard, something unbreakable. Dolores listened, her eyes widening with each detail. I saw the story reflected in her gaze, the sheer outrageousness of it, confirming that I wasn't losing my mind, that this wasn't normal. When I finished, the silence hung heavy, punctuated only by the distant hiss of the espresso machine.
She didn't invite her own mother to her wedding? Charlotte did that?
Her voice was low, incredulous.
He just let her?
Hearing her say it, seeing her shock, was potent validation. It chipped away at the isolation Charlotte and Arthur had inadvertently tried to build around me through their actions. The untold truth of manipulation, the insidious way it relies on making you feel alone, making you doubt your reality, withered under the gaze of a loyal friend. Sharing the story wasn't just venting. It was an act of defiance. It was reclaiming my narrative, anchor point by anchor point, in the warm, real world of the Daily Bean.
I don't even know what to say. It's monstrous.
Her shock was a mirror reflecting the ugliness I'd faced. It solidified my resolve. The emotional release didn't leave me weak. It cleared the air, leaving behind a hard core of determination. They thought stripping me of that connection, that public moment at the Bellamy Ballroom later, would diminish me. They were wrong. It had only sharpened my focus. The numbers on the page were cold, hard facts staring back at me. They were figures Charlotte and Thomas had clearly never bothered to truly understand, or perhaps dismissed entirely in their rush to secure their future. Sitting across from Patricia Chen in her uncluttered office, the hum of the air conditioning a steady counterpoint to the racing thoughts in my head, I felt the last vestiges of bewildered victimhood begin to crumble.
Here are the consolidated reports, Eleanor.
Patricia's voice was calm, professional, grounding.
We've pulled everything. Your separate brokerage accounts, the funds inherited from your mother that were kept distinct, the deed to the mountain cabin in your name alone, and the investments linked to the Vance Family Foundation that predate your marriage.
She slid a stack of binders and printouts across the polished desk. The paper felt crisp, real, tangible proof. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for them, but it wasn't with fear. It was with a growing, potent realization. Charlotte and Thomas had seen me only through the lens of Arthur's life, Arthur's assets, Arthur's perceived control. They had assumed my financial standing was inextricably tied to my marriage, a dependency they could easily manipulate or discard. They were wrong. Utterly, completely wrong.
As you can see,
Patricia continued, pointing to a summary page.
your personal portfolio is quite substantial. It wasn't just PIN money or joint savings. These are assets accumulated and managed independently over decades. Significant assets.
Significant was an understatement. It was a fortress I hadn't realized I owned, built over years of quiet prudence and foresight they'd been too arrogant to notice. My mind raced, connecting the dots James Sterling had drawn for me in his Meagle strategy to the raw financial power Patricia was laying bare. This wasn't just about having enough to live comfortably at Brightleaf Senior Living. This was leverage, real leverage. I looked up, meeting Patricia's steady gaze.
The access to these accounts? My name is the sole signatory on many of these. Absolutely. Unfettered access. These are yours, legally and indisputably.
The shift inside me was palpable, almost violent. The tight knot of helplessness that had cinched my chest since October 26th, since Charlotte's cruel pronouncement, began to loosen. It wasn't replaced by anger, not entirely, but by a cold, exhilarating certainty. Charlotte and Thomas Hayes had calculated their moves based on a false premise, on the assumption that I was a fragile, dependent relic of the past. They had underestimated me not just emotionally, but financially. And that oversight, that one critical blind spot in their greedy plan, had just become my most powerful weapon. The figures didn't lie. They didn't judge. They simply presented the facts. And the facts gave me options they never dreamed I had. My internal sense of being cornered evaporated, replaced by the sharp, clean lines of strategy. Stepping into the hushed, cool air of Sterling & Associates felt like crossing a threshold. The scent of polished wood and old paper was a stark contrast to the frantic scent of pine needles and damp earth I'd smelled just days ago, leaving the Ashwood Residence for what felt like the last time. My resolve had hardened in the quiet hours since I left Magnolia Lane. James Sterling was waiting, a man whose reputation preceded him. Sharp, experienced, utterly professional. I sat across from him, the weight of my betrayal settling into grim determination rather than sorrow. I laid out the facts plainly. The wedding invitation incident, Charlotte's calculated cruelty, Arthur's passive complicity, the swiftness of my departure. My core concern wasn't revenge, it was protection. Protection of what was mine, protection of myself. Sterling listened intently, his gaze steady.
So, Mrs. Vance, you've left the residence, and you've had no direct contact since October 26th.
His voice was calm, cutting through the emotional noise. None, I confirmed, and I don't intend to initiate any.
A wise decision. Many people make the mistake of engaging while emotional. You acted decisively.
He paused, looking at the papers I'd brought.
Based on what you've described, Your position is significantly stronger than they likely anticipated. Frankly, it sounds like they greatly underestimated you.
His words landed like a solid anchor. It wasn't just his professional opinion, it was the untold truth I'd felt instinctively the moment I packed that first bag. They thought they could isolate me, discard me, while I crumbled. They were wrong. We discussed the legal ramifications of my leaving, not abandoning. We talked through asset protection, securing accounts, ensuring Charlotte and Thomas Hayes couldn't attempt any maneuvers with family resources. Like the Vance Family Foundation, that might affect me. The conversation was sharp, strategic, a rapid-fire exchange of legal possibilities and protective actions.
Your assets are sound. We'll put protections in place immediately. As for communication with Charlotte and Arthur, my advice is minimal, if any, and strictly through counsel if necessary. Let them wonder. Let them misstep.
His strategy mirrored the calculated action I now craved. No emotional appeals, no dramatic confrontations, not yet. Just quiet, legal fortification. The fear that had gripped me initially began to recede, replaced by a cool, strategic calm. I had moved from reacting to their manipulations to planning my counter-strategy. The consequences of their actions, I now saw clearly, would unfold not through my tears, but through my silence and the measured steps I was now taking. I wasn't fragile. I was tactical. The air in Brightleaf felt different, clean, quiet, not thick with the manufactured tension and unspoken accusations that had clung to every surface of Ashwood Residence. Here, the silence was a presence, a companion, not the heavy absence of love. My new apartment was small, but it was mine. Every book on the shelf, every simple chair placed by my own hand. There was a small balcony, just enough space for a single chair and a pot of geraniums. Overlooking landscaped grounds near Raleigh, a far cry from the sprawling, demanding gardens I'd left behind. The move itself had been swift, efficient. James Sterling's team had ensured everything ran smoothly, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos that had defined my last days on Magnolia Lane. There was no drama here, no demands whispered or shouted, just the gentle hum of independent living. A staff member had shown me the basic amenities, her voice calm and professional.
Your emergency pull cord is in the bathroom, Mrs. Vance. And laundry facilities are down the hall.
Simple facts, no hidden agendas. This solitude wasn't loneliness, it was liberation. At Ashwood, every corner was a reminder of Arthur's passivity or Charlotte's calculating gaze. My time was never truly my own. It was constantly being sectioned off, accounted for, judged. Here, I could sit with my thoughts, feel the sun on my face, read a book cover to cover without interruption. It was a peace I hadn't realized I was starving for. They believed removing me from their narrative, from Charlotte's wedding, from the performative display they were orchestrating, would diminish me, make me small, insignificant. They thought cutting me out of the picture would leave me isolated, crumbling in the corner. That was their profound, untold truth. They fundamentally misunderstood the source of my strength. They thought my life revolved around them. They saw me as a satellite, reliant on their orbit. What they failed to grasp was that the strain of orbiting them Their endless need and manipulation was what had depleted me. Removing that gravitational pull hadn't sent me spinning into darkness. It had allowed me to find my own center. The space they created by excluding me wasn't a void. It was fertile ground. It was the quiet I needed to hear my own thoughts again, the solitude required to gather my scattered pieces and reassemble them, stronger. Their act of calculated cruelty, intended to erase me, had inadvertently given me the freedom to rebuild. They hadn't diminished me. They had simply removed the weight holding me down, and I was beginning to stand taller than ever before. November 9th, 2023. The day bloomed outside the window of my apartment at Brightleaf Senior Living, deceptively bright. Inside, the silence was absolute, heavy enough to press down on your chest. This was the day Charlotte Miller married Thomas Hayes. This was the day they expected me to crumble, perhaps call, perhaps even show up begging to be let in. They underestimated me, just as they always had. The morning light filtered through the blinds. I made coffee. The only sound, the gentle hum of the machine. No television, no radio. I had muted the world deliberately. The silence wasn't empty. It was filled with my own quiet strength, my resolve hardening into a shield. This absence wasn't the punishment for me, not anymore. It was my choice, my act of reclaiming control. I remembered the sharp edge in Charlotte's voice weeks ago, the one that cut deeper than any blade.
Mother, it's a private event. We've decided not to have a large guest list.
The lie hung between us, thick and ugly.
You would fit.
Fit? As if I were the awkward piece in the puzzle of their carefully constructed image? Arthur had stood by, passive as ever. I could almost hear him sighing.
Eleanor, maybe it's for the best. Less stress.
Stress for whom? Not for them, certainly. Their stress would have come from having a witness to their performance who knew the script was a sham. My absence was meant to inflict maximum pain. They wanted me weeping, alone, desperate for a crumb of inclusion. But my strategic detachment, my physical removal to Brightleaf, had turned the weapon back on itself. The silence wasn't my suffering. It was their lack of spectacle. They wouldn't get the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. They wouldn't get the performance of my grief. I walked through the quiet halls of Brightleaf, the polished floors reflecting the soft light. Other residents were going about their routines, blissfully unaware of the seismic emotional event happening miles away at the Bellamy Ballroom in Durham. I felt a strange sense of peace, wrapped in my deliberate isolation. I had removed their power to inflict pain today. The silence was my armor. It was empowering. A week had passed since November 9th, 2023, the day they got married, the day they believed they had buried me under the weight of their calculated cruelty. I had found a quiet, steady rhythm at Brightleaf Senior Living, a place that smelled faintly of lemon polish and possibility, utterly unlike the stagnant air at Ashwood Residence on Magnolia Lane. My solitude wasn't pain. It was fortification. Then, on November 16th, 2023, my phone buzzed, shattering the deliberate peace I had built. It was Charlotte Miller. The message appeared, deceptively casual, framed in forced warmth.
Hi, Mom. Hope you're doing okay. Just wanted to check in, thinking of you.
Thinking of me? A sharp, cold laugh threatened to escape my throat, but I contained it. This wasn't a message board of genuine concern. This was a probe, a fishing line cast into expected waters, waiting for the predictable, devastated bite. Charlotte and Thomas Hayes had anticipated grief, tears, perhaps desperate attempts from me to reach out, to understand, to beg for a place back in their narrative. They expected a weeping mother left out of her daughter's wedding after October 26, 2023, after I was told I wasn't invited, and certainly after I left on October 28, 2023. But they didn't find that mother. They found Granite. My fingers hovered over the screen. Dolores Ramirez had warned me they wouldn't just disappear. They would test the boundaries of my new silence. This trivial message, this feigned innocence, was their first test. My internal response was immediate. A surge not of sadness, but of ice-cold strategy. There was no frantic urge to reply, no wellspring of emotion to spill. The woman who had planned to exclude me, who had colluded with Thomas Hayes and allowed Arthur Davies' passivity, deserved nothing but the stark, unyielding consequence of her actions. My silence, my calm, my utter lack of the expected desperate reaction was the first sharp crack in their carefully constructed plan. I didn't respond. Not immediately, not with haste, not with the emotional outpouring she craved and anticipated. My mind was already miles ahead, consulting with James Sterling at Sterling and Associates, reviewing financials with Patricia Chin. My world wasn't collapsing. It was expanding, hardening. The untold truth of that moment was simple and brutal. My lack of devastation was devastating to Charlotte. She had thrown her pebble into the water, expecting a tidal wave of my pain, and instead, it had landed with a dull thud on solid ground. The silence from my end wasn't hurt. It was power. And she could feel the first icy tendrils of regret, fueled by the chilling realization that her carefully orchestrated plan had failed to break me, leaving her to face the unexpected consequences. The air at Brightleaf Senior Living still held the quiet hum of routine, a routine I was finally settling into, a balm after the recent upheaval. But even here, whispers found a way to travel. It started subtly, a comment overheard in the dining hall, a phone call from Dolores, and then, more directly, from Mrs. Henderson. "Eleanor, dear," Mrs. Henderson began one afternoon, her voice pitched low as we sat in the sunroom. "I ran into Carol Peterson at the club." I met her gaze. Outwardly calm, lovely, of course, but Carol mentioned something about the atmosphere feeling rather strained and awkward, strangely enough. I simply nodded, letting her continue. More interestingly, Mrs. Henderson leaned in slightly. She said people were quite curious about your absence. Your friends, associates of Arthur's, even some of Charlotte's own contemporaries. They expected you to be there. It wasn't gossip I craved, but information, validation. They hadn't just dismissed me. They had created a conspicuous vacuum. My internal monologue was a sharp, quick note. They thought I was irrelevant. Then came the practical details, filtered through Mrs. "And there's talk," she continued, lowering her voice further, about some unexpected difficulties. Financial, I gather. The Vance Family Foundation. Of course, they had planned to use it, hadn't they? Leverage its name, its network. It wasn't just a name on paper. It was influence, respect, connections built on trust. Things Charlotte and Thomas couldn't simply inherit or command. I felt a cool, steady resolve. This was the untold truth they hadn't factored in. Their carefully constructed plan, focused solely on immediate gain, had failed to account for the deep roots I had laid down, not just financially, but socially. My absence wasn't just a personal slight. It was a disruption to the expected order of things. It seems Mrs. Optimistic was a gentle word for delusional. They had seen me as an obstacle to be removed, not a cornerstone of the very world they hoped to elevate themselves within. The whispers weren't just gossip. They were the first tremors of consequences, echoing through the social circles of North Carolina. My actions hadn't been about revenge. They had been about self-preservation and setting a clear boundary. The fallout for Charlotte and Thomas wasn't orchestrated by me, but it was a direct result of their choices and their profound misjudgment of my quiet strength and underlying influence. The ground beneath them was beginning to shift. The December air in Durham held a crisp bite, but inside the Bellamy Ballroom, it was warm, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and possibility. Or maybe just carefully curated appearances. Patricia Chen had been right about the dress. This Carolina Herrera wasn't just fabric, it was armor, flowing and elegant, a quiet declaration. Stepping onto the polished floor on December 5th, 2023, felt less like attending a social event and more like walking into a carefully constructed tableau I was determined to disrupt simply by being. They were here, of course. Charlotte Miller, luminous and poised beside Thomas Hayes, working the room with practiced smiles, likely conducting their personal brand of damage control, projecting an image of success built on what they'd taken. They hadn't expected me. Perhaps they'd hoped I'd crumble, hide away in my new reality at Brightleaf Senior Living, out of sight, out of mind. But crumbling wasn't in the plan anymore. My presence wasn't some desperate attempt at reconciliation or a cry for attention. It was a quiet, powerful statement. I was still here, intact, strong. My social standing was mine to hold, not theirs to grant or revoke. An acquaintance, old Mrs. Henderson, spotted me near the entrance. Her eyes widened just slightly, then softened into a genuine smile. She approached, her voice a worn, familiar murmur above the din. Older female. "Eleanor, my dear, how lovely to see you out." I returned her smile, holding her gaze steadily. "Helen, it's wonderful to see you too." Older female. "Indeed. We were all so concerned after, it warms my heart to see you looking so well." She glanced subtly towards Charlotte and Thomas across the room. I followed her gaze, my expression carefully neutral. She squeezed my arm gently. "But you, Eleanor, there's a piece about you I haven't seen in years." Her observation was sharper than she knew. Peace, yes, but forged in fire and tempered with resolve. My presence wasn't about making them uncomfortable. Although the flicker of surprise I caught on Charlotte's face when she first saw me was not unpleasant, it was about proving to myself and anyone who might have doubted that my world hadn't ended when theirs shifted. My strength didn't derive from my role as wife or mother within their narrative. It was an internal wellspring. This ballroom, this evening, wasn't a battleground. It was simply ground I chose to stand on, firmly and visibly, entirely on my own terms. They could project whatever image they wanted. My reality was independent now, and that was the true power in the room. The air in the Bellamy Ballroom still carried the faint scent of expensive perfume and something akin to regret. I saw Charlotte Miller weaving through the last stragglers near the exit, her posture calculated, a strained smile fixed on her face. She aimed directly for me. A flicker of something, was it nerves, crossed her eyes as she approached. This was the moment. She stopped a foot away, her voice soft, almost pleading.
Mother, I saw you from across the room. I wasn't sure if you'd come.
She fiddled with the clasp on her small evening bag.
I hope you're doing all right. Difficult.
Difficulty? The word hit me like a shard of glass. Not difficult for me in the way she imagined. Difficult for her, perhaps, now that her carefully constructed plan was beginning to unravel. My own voice was steady, level, no tremor, no heat. The cold clarity I'd found at Brightleaf Senior Living held firm. "Charlotte," I said, my gaze unwavering. Her smile faltered.
The house? Everything? Arthur is so worried. We both are.
The lie was transparent, flimsy. Worry wasn't what had driven them. It was greed, pure and simple. I stepped slightly closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear, the elegant murmur of the room fading away. Worried? You weren't worried on October 26, 2023, were you? I saw a muscle twitch in her jaw. You weren't worried about me then. You were confident. Confident you'd calculated every angle. My eyes held hers, piercing through the carefully built facade. You thought you understood my finances. You thought you understood me. The untold truth hung between us. I saw it all. Every step of their scheme. Every patronizing assumption they'd made about my capabilities, my resilience. She stammered.
That's not fair.
Given everything, I finished for her, my voice still calm, still quiet, but laced with steel. Given that you underestimated me completely. Your difficulty now, Charlotte, is realizing the cost of that miscalculation. I gave her a small, polite nod, the kind reserved for a distant acquaintance, and walked away, leaving her standing alone amidst the fading elegance of the Bellamy Ballroom. She looked less like the woman who had planned a perfect life, and more like a child whose carefully constructed sandcastle had just been washed away. The satisfaction was cold, sharp, and utterly complete. That quiet sense of control I'd found didn't mean I stopped seeing them. In fact, the world seemed determined to place them directly in my path just as their carefully constructed edifice began to sway. The scent of pine needles and damp earth after a southern rain, a smell that usually brought peace, now seemed to underscore the feeling of something decaying just out of sight. It was early December, the air crisp, when we ended up at the Bellamy Ballroom. December 5th, 2023. The date stood out because it was the first time I saw the cracks appear, not just heard about them. Charlotte Miller and Thomas Hayes were there. Of course, social obligations demanded it. I saw them from across the room, near the grand staircase. They were whispering fiercely, Charlotte's hand gripping Thomas's arm, her usual bright confidence replaced by a pinched, anxious look. Thomas kept glancing around, not with his usual smooth charm, but with a nervous darting of his eyes. Dolores Ramirez drifted over to me, a knowing look in her eyes.
You see them?
She murmured, tilting her head subtly towards the staircase. I nodded, my gaze steady.
Heard things.
She continued, her voice low.
About the foundation and finances. Seems that little plan of theirs wasn't quite as foolproof as they thought.
My heart gave a sharp, quiet beat. This was it. The consequences. They thought they could simply erase me, take what they felt entitled to, and I would disappear into quiet sorrow. They built their strategy on my perceived weakness. They underestimated me completely. They never saw the steel beneath the soft exterior, the strategic mind my father had unknowingly honed. My pivot, my swift action with James Sterling and Patricia Chen hadn't just secured my future. It had pulled the first threads on their tapestry. Later that evening, Mrs. Henderson, ever the keen observer, commented as she passed.
Charlotte looks strained tonight, doesn't she? Not his usual buoyant self. Life has a way of coming full circle, dear.
She smiled faintly, a woman who had seen much. Life had indeed come full circle. The financial leverage they thought they had, gone. The control they craved over the Vance family foundation, now complicated and scrutinized because my financial independence meant I wasn't easily silenced or dismissed. Their social standing, slightly tarnished by the whispers surrounding the wedding incident and my very public move to Brightleaf Senior Living with unexpected grace. It wasn't a dramatic collapse, not yet. It was slower, more insidious, compelling. Their betrayal, rooted in greed and the false premise of my fragility, was now the anchor dragging them down. Every tense whisper, every strained smile I saw across the room was a repercussion echoing back at them. Silence wasn't just empty space. It was loaded with unspoken words, shifting allegiances playing out in guarded glances across crowded rooms. After the dust began to settle from Charlotte Miller's wedding, after my calm, independent presence at Brightleaf Senior Living became more visible than my absence from Ashwood Residence, the air around Charlotte and Thomas Hayes began to change. It wasn't loud or dramatic at first. It was the quiet comments I overheard. The subtle way conversations stopped when Charlotte walked by. The sudden availability of people who had once seemed utterly absorbed in her circle. My strength, my quiet resilience, the simple fact that I wasn't falling apart, as perhaps expected, seemed to act as a mirror, reflecting the increasingly evident strains in Charlotte and Thomas's own lives. Their carefully constructed facade, built on exclusion and manipulation, was starting to crack. I saw Arthur Davies at a town council meeting. He didn't approach me directly, not with the easy warmth he once had, but across the aisle, I caught his eye. There was a flicker of something I hadn't seen in months. Not anger, not dismissiveness, but a kind of weary acknowledgement. He knew, I think, or at least he was starting to see, The conflict avoidance that had made him passive, complicit, was being challenged by the undeniable reality unfolding before him. Later that week, Dolores Ramirez and I were having coffee at the Daily Bean, a small comfort in the changing landscape. Dolores, steadfast as ever, nodded towards a table near the window. Mrs. Henderson was there, talking quietly with a neighbor. I didn't hear their words, but Mrs. Henderson caught my eye and offered a small, genuine smile, a world away from the pity or awkwardness I sometimes encountered. It was a smile of respect. "Eleanor? Eleanor, dear?" Mrs. Henderson said, stopping by our table as she left. "You look well." Her gaze lingered for a moment, a silent commentary on the stark contrast between my newfound peace and the rumors circulating about Charlotte and Thomas's mounting financial pressures and social faux pas. It was a simple observation, but it hit with sharp clarity. The social capital Charlotte and Thomas had so ruthlessly pursued, believing my exclusion would somehow elevate them, was eroding. People weren't seeing the glamorous couple they tried to project. They were seeing the frantic effort behind it, the lack of grace under pressure. My dignified response, my refusal to engage in their drama, had inadvertently highlighted their own instability. They had underestimated the quiet power of simply living well, authentically, when faced with malice. The consequences for them were beginning to unfold, not through my actions, but through the collective perception of their own making. The scent of pine needles after a brief afternoon rain in Oakwood Park wasn't a backdrop anymore. It was the air I breathed, clean and unburdened. At Brightleaf Senior Living, life wasn't a retreat from the world, but a deliberate, chosen re-engagement. The silence wasn't emptiness, it was peace. I had walked away from the noise, the manipulation, the suffocating expectations, and found that the absence wasn't a void, but fertile ground. I spent my mornings in the sun-drenched common room, not mourning a lost past, but discovering forgotten joys. Watercolors bled on the page, clumsy at first, then with growing confidence. I joined the walking group that explored the landscaped grounds, the conversations light, free of hidden agendas or poisoned undercurrents. We talked about books, recipes, the changing seasons, the simple pleasure of a perfectly brewed glass of sweet tea on a warm afternoon. One afternoon, sharing a bench by the rose garden with another resident, Martha, she looked at me, a knowing kindness in her eyes. I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. "I am Martha?" she asked gently. "Yes. Been there," she sighed, nodding. "Or desperation," I countered, my voice gaining a sharper edge for a moment. "When you realize they've left you no other choice. They thought by cutting me out, by isolating me, they were diminishing me, reducing me to a problem solved, the untold truth they missed. By severing those ties, they didn't take away my life, they gave it back to me." I had pursued interests I'd set aside decades ago, not because I had free time, but because I finally felt I had permission to exist for myself. Every book I read, every new skill I learned, every genuine connection I made here was a brick in the foundation of this new life. A life built deliberately, peacefully, strategically, on the solid ground of my own making. It was the ultimate refutation of their attempts to erase me. The shrill ring of the phone tore through the quiet afternoon at Brightleaf Senior Living like a physical blow. I almost didn't answer. Peace had become a precious commodity, hard won, and that sound felt like a threat to it. But I picked up, my hand steady.
Mother, it's Charlotte.
Her voice was tight, strained, utterly lacking the brittle confidence I was used to. I waited. No greeting, no apology, just the sound of her breath catching. This was different. The previous attempts had been weak, perfunctory, desperate.
We need to talk.
She trailed off, then plunged ahead, the words spilling out in a rush.
There are issues. Helpful. Things aren't what we expected. What I expected.
There it was. The calculation had finally caught up to her. Not regret for the hurt she'd caused, but regret for the consequences she was now facing, likely financial or tied to the social standing she'd chased so relentlessly. She hadn't missed me. She'd missed the shield I provided, the resources I controlled, the stability she'd burned down. My mind was sharp, dissecting her every hesitant word. She saw the full extent of her miscalculations now. The hollow victory of her wedding without me.
Fix things, help, with the foundation, everything.
The word help hung in the air, heavy with implied expectations, dripping with the same old sense of entitlement disguised as reconciliation. She was offering crumbs of potential remorse, hoping I'd trade them for access to the very things she'd tried to steal or sideline me from. I took a slow breath, grounding myself in the solid reality of my sun-drenched apartment, my carefully constructed life. The woman who had flinched from confrontation, who had tried to appease, was gone. "Charlotte," I said, my voice calm, steady, utterly devoid of warmth. "I hear you." I paused, letting the weight of the silence press down on her.
No. Mother, please.
"Oh, I understand perfectly," I cut in, my tone unwavering. "I understand that your choices have led you here. I understand you are facing consequences you didn't anticipate. But those consequences are yours alone. There is nothing to fix between us. My refusal was definitive, non-negotiable, rooted not in anger, but in an absolute certainty. I was no longer vulnerable to her manipulation, her carefully crafted pleas. I saw the calculated nature even in her regret. My peace, my assets, my future, they were mine to protect. The consequences of her actions were irreversible. I hung up the phone, the click echoing the sound of a door closing forever. October 26th, 2023. The date was a scar, a raw wound ripped open by the very people who should have protected me. I remember the crushing weight of Charlotte's words, the cold calculation in them, the sheer, brutal efficiency of the betrayal. It felt like the world had fractured, my life's foundation crumbling into dust right before my eyes. But standing here now, in the quiet gardens of Brightleaf Senior Living, feeling the gentle North Carolina sun on my face, that day feels both impossibly distant and intimately familiar. Not as pain, but as a lesson. The journey from that moment, leaving the Ashwood Residence 2 days later with only what I could carry and the address for Sterling and Associates, was steep. Every step forward feeling like an act of sheer will. But with each firm boundary set, each negotiation James Sterling navigated with surgical precision, each long, understanding call with Dolores Ramirez, I felt strength seep back into my bones. I learned the profound lesson that family isn't just blood. It's loyalty, honesty, and respect, qualities glaringly absent in those closest to me at the time. I learned that betrayal is a mirror, reflecting not your worthlessness, but the other person's character or lack thereof. They underestimated me, Charlotte and Thomas, and even Arthur in his passive complicity. They saw a woman they thought was dependent, pliable, perhaps a little naive about the world outside their carefully constructed bubble. They didn't see the steel forged over a lifetime, the quiet resolve that could harden in an instant. Seeing the natural consequences unfold for them, the whispers, the strained social smiles, the unexpected financial complications their scheme ultimately invited, has been a quiet, deeply personal satisfaction. It wasn't vengeance I sought, but justice, a rebalancing of the scales they'd tipped so carelessly. Dolores was my lifeline in those initial turbulent weeks, her unwavering belief in me, a constant light.
Eleanor, you did the right thing. You are strong enough.
She'd told me countless times over coffee at the Daily Bean. James Sterling wasn't just an attorney. He became a trusted advisor, guiding me through complex legal and financial landscapes, securing my future with calm expertise.
Your position is stronger than you think, Mrs. Vance. Let them underestimate you. It's their mistake.
He'd advised, a dry smile playing on his lips during our meetings at Sterling & Associates. Now, I sit here truly independent, charting my own course. The peace I found isn't the absence of scars, but the acceptance of them as proof of resilience. I look forward to the future, to new chapters here at Brightleaf, unburdened by the weight of past manipulations. It's a quiet triumph, yes, but it feels immense. Wind down begins. The sun dips lower behind the manicured trees on the grounds of Brightleaf. There's a softness to the air here, a gentle hum of quiet contentment that is a world away from the tension that used to coil in my gut. I watch the shadows lengthen, the light turn golden on the grass, and a profound sense of gratitude washes over me. It wasn't the future I had planned, not in the grand, sweeping sense of family gatherings and shared holidays. But it is a future I built, piece by painstaking piece, out of the wreckage they left behind. The lessons linger, not as sharp reminders of pain, but as guideposts. Trust must be earned, not freely given based on title. Your worth is inherent, not granted by the approval of others. And sometimes, the greatest act of love for yourself is stepping away from those who consistently hurt you, even if they are family. The scent of blooming jasmine drifts on the breeze, mingling with the distant, comforting smell of pine needles after a recent rain. So uniquely North Carolina, grounding me in this new reality. The quiet here is a balm, a sanctuary. No hurried footsteps, no sudden demands, no underlying current of manipulation. Just the gentle rhythm of nature, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant sound of a bird's evening song. My heart feels lighter, the tightness that resided there for so long finally gone. I am at peace. I am safe. I am finally free. And that, I realize, is everything.